Welcome to another Jefferson County Library Talk About. This evening, we are joined by John Nelson and the High Desert Museum's Oregon Wildlife Watch, and they're going to explain the trail cameras they've lended to the library for us to loan out to Jefferson County patrons. Please look for information on borrowing trail cameras from the library on jcld.org.
All right. I'll just get into it. So my name is John Nelson. I'm the curator of wildlife at the High Desert Museum. And the reason I'm here is that we've created a program based around having trail cameras available for checkout at a number of the local libraries, including here in Madras. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to talk about my background with trail cameras and then about the project that we specifically have created. So I've got some personal pictures in here. So I think these days many people are familiar with trail cameras. I've been doing projects in science with trail cameras for about the last 10 years. And when I first started doing this, not many people knew what they were. It was mainly the hunting community that was using them to track things like game animals. These days, I think more people are aware of them, but kind of my introduction to trail cameras was through hunting. So I spent a lot of time putting them up to track things like deer and elk and bears that I was interested in harvesting. I spent a lot of time outdoors with my kids. My kids got involved with this with me. So I had a non-traditional route into my career. I spent the first 12 years of my career working in the lumber products industry, at which time I decided to go back to school to be a wildlife biologist. So while I was in school, these are the kinds of pictures we would get with the hunting situation with trail cameras. Lots of pictures of mule deer, elk, and black bears. So a little bit of a gross picture, but when I started going to school, I created my first research project around trail cameras. And what I was studying was scavenger interactions, so scavengers being species that feed on things that they find dead. And we were using trail cameras to record the presence and absence and the kinds of animals that would come to carrion, to dead animals, and the kind of behavior of those animals on those resources. So what we would do is we would take a steer head from the butcher shop, take it out in the woods, and we would hang it in front of a trail camera. And anything that came to feed on that head would get its picture taken. What we quickly realized is that doesn't perfectly simulate a natural phenomenon. So if you've ever been out and you've seen like dead deer on the road or a dead deer out in the woods, you've probably seen different animals coming to it. But a dead deer is different than just cow heads. So the reason being, it has an intact hide and it's an entire dead deer, which a lot of animals are probably specifically looking for. So we started collecting road-killed deer. During the course of this research study, I collected probably about 100 mule deer, and we would take those out haphazardly onto the landscape, and we would place them with a trail camera. And what we ended up actually getting was a lot of interactions with things like golden eagles and corvids. Corvids being things like crows, magpies, and jays. And what we were kind of studying was this idea, which you may or may not have heard of, and it's an anecdotal idea that goes back to like the journals of Lewis and Clark, which is that ravens and magpies, when they find a dead deer, they can't get through the hide of that deer in order to feed on it. So they will go out. This was the idea. They would go out and find an eagle and bring it back to the carcass, and the eagle would open it. So through the use of trail cameras, we were able to document definitely that ravens and eagles were coming to feed on carcasses, but the relationship was not what people thought that it was. So what would happen is we would put these carcasses out and the trail camera would record when the first raven showed up. And it didn't matter whether we put a carcass out and the ravens found it in an hour or if it took them 2 months to find it. What would happen is the second that a raven found that carcass, within 2 hours, there would be a golden eagle on it. So it wasn't that the ravens were going out and getting the eagles, it's that the eagles had learned to follow the ravens. And so we were able to publish 2 papers on that. One of the interesting papers that we published was just about the interaction, the behaviors, and the relationship between the eagles and the ravens. But there was another study that we worked on that we published, and it was just the rate at which eagles show up on carrion. And the reason that that's important is statistically, they can look at how much carrion is available on the landscape, and it can be valuable to know how often eagles are finding that because they get exposed to things like lead poisoning and chemical poisoning through the carcasses that they find. And that's an important issue that wildlife managers are attempting to mitigate. So that was my first kind of study with trail cameras. We got a lot of cool pictures, not just of eagles and ravens and magpies, but things like coyotes feeding on the deer, bald eagles, mountain lions. We had quite a few mountain lions coming to the carcasses. And then through this work, that kind of led in to my next kind of study research project that I worked on. And this is one of the reasons that we are interested in making trail cameras available to the public, is because I'm really passionate about community science, and I believe that people in the community see things and know things that scientists are not aware of. So we were putting out these deer carcasses to study eagles and ravens, and getting all different kinds of other animals on them. And all of a sudden, one day I went to check a camera and I had this animal on the camera. And if you don't know what that is, that's a red fox. At the time, it was kind of unknown how many red foxes were in the state of Oregon and what species they were. We knew that we had invasive red foxes, especially down at the lowlands, but this was way up high at elevation in the Cascades. We weren't really sure what kind of fox was there. And all of a sudden we had one on camera. Pretty soon we started getting more, and you'll notice in these pictures, although they are red foxes, they're actually black in coloration. So because the first one was red and some of the other ones we got were black, we knew we didn't only have one fox, we had multiple foxes kind of out in this location. So what was going on here is that there's these subspecies of red fox that live high in the mountains, and they're considered to be an endangered species. And at that time, we didn't know that they existed in the state of Oregon. People thought they were a subspecies called the Cascade red fox that lives up in Washington, but through further studies, we discovered that they're actually Sierra Nevada red fox, which is a species you might have heard of. It's been in the news in the last 5 or 6 years. At that time, they thought that the only place that these foxes existed was in a little tiny piece of ground in Northern California. And they thought that there was less than 50 of them in the whole world. But all of a sudden, we were getting pictures of them up here in the Cascades. So that meant that there was more than they originally thought, and that they might not be critically endangered. So because of that, I started working with ODFW and the U.S. Forest Service, helping them survey the Deschutes National Forest for foxes. So I rolled right from this study of eagles and corvids into this survey of rare carnivores. And again, we were using trail cameras to study this. Rather than using a whole deer, the picture on the left shows kind of a bait cage that we would make, and we would put all kinds of sticky stuff in that bait cage, whether it was pieces of deer meat or fish. The little golden thing on the camera below that is just a can of sardines. So I would take a can of sardines and nail them to the tree, and that would stink for a long time, which attracted a lot of animals. Below that, we would put this contraption that we call a hair snare. And all that was a piece of plastic with these gun brushes like you would use to clean the bore of a rifle. And what that did is when an animal smelled that meat and they would come in to see what it was, they would reach up to get the meat and their belly would rub on those gum brushes and it would pull out hair. And that allowed us to get genetic samples to kind of figure out what the genetics were of some of the animals that we're visiting. In addition to that, we would use a trail camera, and on an adjacent tree, we would point the trail camera at the hair snare so we could see what kinds of animals were coming, but also we were able to, like I said, collect hair that would then go to the UC Davis genetics lab in order for them to do DNA testing. And again, they were trying to figure out exactly what species of fox this was, and it ended up being the Sierra Nevada red fox. We also got pictures of them throughout the Deschutes National Forest. So in addition to that one localized population which ended up being on Mount Bachelor, a lot of people ended up being aware of that, but we found them off in some other far-flung places. So we know that they ranged kind of over a wider area in that Deschutes National Forest. The museum, and mostly me, ran about 13 camera stations for 7 years. So that's a lot of data over an extended period of time for the Forest Service to get on Sierra Nevada red foxes, but not just them, other species like American marten and black bears and all different kinds of animals. These pictures are going to be hard to see on the video, but this is just some of the other animals that came in. The far right is a bobcat, the middle is a black bear, and the far left is an American marten, which is a weasel-like animal that lives way up in the mountains. We surveyed all through the summertime, and bears were a problem. Bears like to destroy things, so they ruined a lot of our cameras and they stole a lot of our bait. But we still surveyed through the summer because it's important to know not only what kind of animals are active at that elevation in the wintertime, but to know what's going on like in the middle of summer when it's warm out. Turns out it was mostly bears. So that's the second project that I did with trail cameras, but there was a third one that I was involved in, and if anybody is aware of what a wildlife undercrossing is, the first wildlife crossing in the state of Oregon was at Lava Butte, just south of Bend, Oregon, and that's where they created these passages for deer to get under the road. And again, I used trail cameras for this project. At the time, I was working with the Oregon Department of Transportation. They had put in this project that included these undercrossings and these exclusion fences, and the idea was that a lot of deer were being killed on the road. It's not good for the deer, but it also is costing taxpayers a lot because of the damage that's being caused to vehicles. So they wanted to get these animals safely under the road, but they needed to find out whether the structures they built were successful or not. So we had an array of trail cameras that we put up inside and around these wildlife undercrossings to see who was using them. And they were made primarily for mule deer, but again, similar to the other work that I did, all different kinds of species were using those. We also put cameras on away from the wildlife undercrossings. So for example, we would have cameras at the ends of the fences because we wanted to see not only who was using the wildlife undercrossing, but who didn't want to use it and was trying to go around the ends. And all of that information got used to fine-tune and improve designs for later wildlife undercrossings. So those are three of the kind of projects that are examples of how somebody in my career would use trail cameras for their work. And I really love trail cameras. They are easy to use. Anybody can get them. They used to be kind of expensive, but now they're pretty affordable. Widely available. They have gotten very easy to set up, and they're a ton of fun to use. And they just let you see things that you would never get to see otherwise. It's amazing to go to a place in the woods and think that there's not much living there and then hang up a camera and just see all these different kinds of wildlife species that are coming to that spot when you're not around. But also, like I said, I'm passionate about community science. I think people in the community see things and know things that wildlife managers and scientists aren't aware of. And I believe that it's really important for people in the community to share that with scientists so that we can all learn from each other and better manage wildlife. So the data that trail cameras generate can actually be really useful to scientists. If anybody has ever heard of community science, there's a lot of platforms these days, applications on your phone and computer programs that you can use to get involved in helping scientists collect data. Probably one of the more famous ones is eBird, if there's any bird watchers out there. And eBird is just a way that if you're a bird watcher, you can record the birds that you see on an application on your phone, and that goes to Cornell University, and they can use that data to kind of track what's going on with bird populations and where birds are on the landscape, their range, and all different other kinds of things. There are others. There's things like Zooniverse, which if you don't want to go out into the field and collect data, Zooniverse is a website where you can go and other biologists have put their own trail camera pictures up on there, and you can kind of click through them and help them identify the things that are in their pictures. So you could do that one from home. But the one that I really like and that I advocate for and I encourage people to use is iNaturalist. And if anybody's ever used iNaturalist, it's a really cool app. You can download it on your phone. And what it does is it allows you to take a picture not just of birds, but of anything that you see out in the woods, any kind of plant or mushroom or animal or bird or fish, and it will help you identify it. So you take the picture, and then through AI, it'll generate suggestions, and sometimes the suggestions are correct and sometimes they're not. But what's really cool about it is you don't have to exactly know what you saw in order to post it. So you can just take your best guess, you can post it up, and then what happens is scientists and other experts will get on there and they'll look at those and they'll help you identify them. So you can learn about all the different kinds of things that you see when you're out in the woods. Unfortunately, I accidentally have two slides for that. So what we have done at the museum is we got a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services that's allowed us to purchase about 60 or 70 trail cameras. And now we have kits of about 5 of those that are going to be available for checkout in a number of the local libraries. And the goal here is just to make this trail camera technology more accessible to the community and give people a chance to tinker with it and learn about how to use it. So that's our primary goal for the project, but our secondary goal would be to get people to try to use these platforms, iNaturalist, and take their trail camera pictures and get them posted so that scientists can have access to those and to use those. So really quickly, I just want to go through kind of how to post an image on your phone. You can also do it from a desktop, and I think that the kits that we have available for checkout have full instructions, and the museum also has videos on YouTube that you can watch to learn how to do this. So on the left here is the page for the Oregon Wildlife Watch, as if you were looking at it on your cell phone. And it has the name of the project up at the top. It has how many observations have been posted, so how many pictures people have posted, 704 at the time that I made this presentation. People have documented 38 different species with their trail cameras, and right now we have 25 people that have posted photos. So on the right, if you can't tell what that is, that's a porcupine that got his picture taken on one of my trail cameras. So if you were to get this photo, the trail camera is going to generate a lot of information in addition to just the picture of the animal. Many of them will tell you what the temperature was outside, and then it tells you the date and the time, so you know when and where the animal was active. This is my own personal iNaturalist page if I was to load it up. And as you can see, I'm a pretty big nerd. I have 5,000 observations just by myself, and I've identified 21,000 things. And the 21,000 things I've identified are pictures that other people have put up that they didn't know what it was, and I helped them identify it. So if I had that porcupine picture, I would go to my own page, and I would click those 3 lines in the top left-hand corner, and that pulls up this sidebar. And the sidebar allows you to make other observations. The other way that you can do it is just to hit the green plus sign in the lower right. So once this is up, you can click that you are going to make a new observation, and then that brings up this screen on your phone. And if you click the little camera icon, it'll pull up your files, your gallery, and your photos from your phone. And so if that picture is on your phone, you can go to wherever it is in your phone that picture is stored, and it pulls up this. So right there I have the picture of a porcupine and a picture of an elk that I got on my trail cameras. And I want to upload the porcupine, so I would click on that, and then it shows up in that loading screen where you also need to add a couple of other lines of information. The location can be really, really important. So scientists need to know, in order for the data to be useful, they need to know where the picture was taken. So when you click the location, it'll allow you to select on the map kind of where your trail camera was at. It doesn't have to be exact. The general area is fine. But you click on the location where your trail camera was set up, and then you can select from projects that you have joined. So before you do this, you have to go to the Oregon Wildlife Watch page, join the project. But once you're there, you'll get a list, and you can go down to Oregon Wildlife Watch. And then once all that information is in there, you're going to make your best guess about what the animal was, and then you just upload it. And so here's the project page, and as you can see, the porcupine picture is now added to the project page. One thing I will say about the location, if you're not comfortable sharing the specific location, on that original screen for iNaturalist, you can obscure the location. And what obscuring the location does is makes it so that not just anybody can see where your trail camera was at or where you got the picture. It's only people, scientists and projects that you've joined are the only ones that will be able to see where you got that picture. So it's going to obscure the location to a 5-mile radius. Nobody will know exactly where you got the image. And that's my presentation. There's also, like I said, there's ways to do it on a desktop computer. That's going to be a lot easier for some folks. Those instructions are available in the kits. So the last thing that I'll do really quickly is just kind of go over the equipment that is in the kit. Every kit, in addition to instructions, has 3 basic things. One is the trail camera itself, and they come ready to go with a memory card and batteries, so they should be pretty much all ready to go. The memory card should be clear. And the way that you get the pictures off of the trail camera is you pop the memory card out, stick it in your computer, or if you have an adapter to do it on your phone, you can do it that way. The trail cameras are vulnerable to people stealing them or vandalizing them. So the other thing that we have included in the kits is a locking box, which is just a steel box. So when you go to hang it on a tree or a fence post or a stump, you put the trail camera, you turn it on, you put it in the lock box, and the way the lock box fits together makes it so that once you put a lock through here, nobody can open that and mess with your trail camera. And then to make it easy to hang on the trees, there's a bike lock. You can undo the bike lock, put it through the hole in the trail camera, tighten it onto a tree, and then you're ready to go. There's lots of good places to hang trail cameras. You could take it out in the woods somewhere, but another really great place to hang them is just in your backyard. We've had people get pictures of all kinds of stuff in their backyard, including a few years ago, we had a family in Culver get pictures of one of those rare foxes in their driveway. So like I said, you don't have to go far out into the woods to use them. You can use them right on your own property, and it can be really surprising to see what you have running through your driveway.